Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm hopping on a couple of minutes early because I have a thing these days about being late, and so I'm still working on getting all my desk and everything ready for this live stream this morning. How are all you guys out there? I'm trying to get my camera set up and my lighting done. Is everybody doing well? This is Saturday. It is, oh gosh, what is it? It is March the 6th, 2021, and my name is Lizette, and I am looking forward to spending this next hour with you guys. It's a little early on a Saturday morning. I know a lot of people aren't hopping on at 8 o'clock, but I tend to see people hopping on in a couple of minutes or so. So I'm just going to kind of get ready and see whether anybody joins me this morning. So today is, so I want to Let's see, it's 8. Yay! I'm on time, early or on time. I have an immutable law, which is called, if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. I was in boarding school and we had a headmistress, and that was one of her rules. If you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. So I'm trying to be a couple minutes early before I get started on time at 8 o'clock. So welcome to the Baffled Brain, Demystifying Dementia. This is the weekly hour-long Facebook Live that will teach you everything you want to know about how to manage dementia. Today is March the 6th, 2021, and this is episode 15. I cannot believe that I've been doing this for 15 weeks already. And I'm your host, Lizette Cloete from Think Different Dementia, where we believe caregivers deserve reliable and accessible answers to questions, because providing caregivers reliable information and actionable strategies gives them and people with dementia their best quality of life, improving relationships and delaying decline. So this morning I am going to start off with a question that I had on here from last week. If anybody is watching this live, if you have a particular question, please throw it out there for me in the comments. I use the comments and the questions from the comments to kind of start to see where we're going today. So I have a question to answer from Crystal. Crystal says her sister speaks her thoughts out loud repetitively. And what is that? So Crystal, that is a great question. As people are going through a dementia process, if you want to think about it this way, the higher level things that we do, the things that we call the executive functions, which I brought my little trusty handy dandy book with today because I can never remember all 7 of them. There are 7 what we call executive functions, okay? And so the executive functions include the following things: working memory, time management, emotional regulation, cognitive flexibility, the ability to plan things, forethought, learning from consequences, organization, which kind of is very similar to planning, and then reconstitution of information. So working memory, time management, emotional regulation. So when people start to back to Crystal's question, speak their thoughts out loud repetitively, what that kind of means is that they have started to lose their executive functions, and they're starting to have difficulty with what I call their inhibition switch. So they will have trouble with, we all have an inhibition switch, right? We all know when our kids are little and you take them to the grocery store that they will be sometimes seeing somebody doing something and they're like, Mom, can you see that person over there? Look how fat they are. Or, they're picking their nose, or they're doing something inappropriate, right? So when a child has not developed emotional regulation, what that means is they blurt out whatever's in their head, right? Well, as somebody is going through the dementia process, they also lose the ability to control their emotional regulation. And so when Crystal's question was, when her sister speaks her thoughts out loud repetitively, What is that? That is her losing her inhibition switch. So she literally is saying what's on her mind. So, Crystal, I hope that helps you. I hope that helps you with your sister. I know repetitive questions are very frustrating, so if you want to give me, more personalized information, maybe we could come up with some strategies to help you with that. But based on the information that you gave me, there's really that's about all I can answer right now. So then the next question I have, I see it's very early on a Saturday morning because a lot of people are hopping on and hopping off, but that's okay. I will be here. I hope people start to ask me some questions because I only have a handful of questions here this morning. So if you get on live, please ask me questions. If you're on the replay, put replay in the comments. That would be wonderful. If you have any particular questions for me, I would love to answer them this morning. It's a very slow start to this Saturday morning. So the next question is actually from a friend of mine that I've met through this Facebook group by the name of Stephen. Stephen and I kind of message back and forth. So anybody who has particular questions, if you want to message me privately, I am certainly happy to answer questions. I do that for a lot of different people. So Stephen asked, does your loved one believe every scammer, salesman, and phone call she hears, but not you? Yeah, that's pretty common, Stephen. Actually, I have a story about that regarding my own family. My mom has vascular dementia. My mom started with vascular dementia probably, she was 42 when she had her first stroke, and my mom is 73 now. And she had a massive hemorrhagic stroke, massive. Recovered fairly well for as extensive as what her stroke was. But, getting older with an old injury like a stroke or something like that, getting older with that oftentimes causes vascular dementia, which is what she now has. So what is vascular dementia? So vascular dementia is the things like hardening of the arteries. People who have had cardiovascular events or cardiovascular diseases can sometimes get vascular dementia. People who have had a stroke or things like that. So that's literally it. Your brain is just not getting enough blood supply because your vascular system is not doing a good job of sending it the blood supply that it needs. So my mom has vascular dementia, and I noticed that a few years ago. And then what was interesting is I was so focused on my mom, right? I wasn't really paying attention to my dad. Well, my dad has started to show some cognitive decline over the last probably last year. And it's actually interesting if you pay attention, when I go back, when I started to notice it, was when COVID hit. So my dad is 74. He takes care of my mom. He's still working. He was, when COVID started, still working full time. And then he started to stay home because of COVID. I think there was a modicum of depression. Depression can definitely show cognitive changes. People have depression, have cognitive changes. Good morning, everybody out there. If you guys have specific questions, please ask them for me. I'm answering a question from Stephen, who said, does your loved one believe every scammer, salesman, and phone call she hears, but not you? And so the story that I'm telling is about my mom and dad. And I'm going to get to Stephen's question here in a second because it's relevant to my dad. And so my dad started to show some cognitive decline after COVID started, staying at home, not working anymore, etc. Well, December last year, he was actually scammed. And he absolutely believed everything the guy on the phone said to him, which was really strange because my dad's I should know better. I mean, this is what I do for a living, right? But I wasn't anticipating this. It was quite a shock for me. It was very eye-opening to see how easy it is to get scammed. And then he believed that somebody his had to do with Microsoft. So yes, loved ones people with dementia who are starting to have trouble with their executive functioning. Remember, we talked about that earlier. Things like reconstitution of information, time management, anticipating consequences, forethought, planning, organization, and emotional regulation. Those are the 7 executive functions that we spoke about right at the beginning of the program. So people who are starting to have trouble, or if they've already lost their executive functions, they won't be able to anticipate the secondary consequences of their actions. And so believing a scammer, a salesman, a phone call is very common. And then not you. Well, she sees you every day. You're her child, right? She raised you. She took care of you when you were sick and things like that. So you don't have this in her mind. You don't have the same level of authority as somebody on the phone who is a salesperson or a scammer, right? Because as your mom is declining through her dementia process, as she's continuing to decline, you don't know where in the spectrum she now believes you're at. In her mind, you might be a 7-year-old boy, and why are you telling her what to do? In her mind, she might be 35 or 40 or 50 years old, and you may be a younger person. And so, Stephen, I hope that helps you. I don't have a great suggestion as to do what to do regarding how to make sure they're not getting scammed, other than getting control over the phone, which I know in your particular situation, Stephen, might be pretty challenging. So you can only do the best you can. Like I tell everybody, early on in the process, there are a few very important steps that you need to take when you have a loved one who is diagnosed with dementia. And some of those steps, like very early on, which a lot of people don't do, is to start to get some of the things like your legal stuff in place, a will and a durable power of attorney and a power of attorney for health care, and who's going to be the conservator or guardian when the person cannot make their decisions for themselves. A lot of people wait too late for that. So I know that in your particular situation you do have some challenges, and certainly one by one as you bring them to me, we will work through them. So I just wanted to let anybody who watches this later on, if you're on live, put live. If you're on replay, put replay. If you have particular questions for me, I do actually message people back. If you're listening today, there are 3 ways that you can kind of get a hold of me. You can message me through Messenger. You can join my private Facebook group called Think Different Dementia, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel called Think Different Dementia. Those are the 3 ways that you can kind of get these videos as they're released. I've been playing around in my head, actually. For anybody who's watching this today or later on, I'd love some feedback. I've been playing around with thinking about maybe changing this from an hour-long live to maybe 15 minutes more frequently throughout the week, and answering just one question at a time so people can hop on and off a little bit easier, because I know an hour is a long time. Hey Andrea, good morning. How are you? It's glad to have you out there. Do you have any particular questions for me, Miss Andrea, about your loved one? I'm trying to remember, as I get to know people a little bit better, I actually start to recognize their names and their situations. I know you and I have dialogued before, but forgive me, my memory is not that great this morning. So I would love to hear if you have any particular questions for me this morning. So yeah, I would love to have questions. What's your feedback for me regarding an hour versus maybe 15 minutes more frequently throughout the week? Picking one question and answering it. The reason I was wondering about that was because I thought to myself, and myself is the only thing that's up in my head. I thought to myself that if I did that, then on the YouTube channel, I can start to categorize things. For example, executive functions, I can put them all together. I can put all things like negative behaviors or challenging behaviors together, etc. So Anyway, oops, I'm sorry. That was just my thought. So Andrea's not throwing a question at me, so I'm going to go. I've only got two more on here, so this is going to be challenging. If nobody asks me a question, then I'll just sit and talk, which I tend to be able to do, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. So Miss Trudy is a new member to this group, and I don't know, a lot of you guys may or may not know, but I'm actually originally from South Africa, so I wrote down Trudy's question, um, and I would love to answer it here. Trudy is also from South Africa. I don't remember where she's at, but I try to tag people in these afterwards to let them know that I did answer their questions on the live stream. Um, Andrea says, you have POA, and I helped connect you with somebody for the balance. Yay, that's right. I do remember. I do remember now. Were you able to get a hold of, was that helpful? Were there some exercises you could do by yourself? Do you have any more questions about your balance and those kinds of things that I can answer? So I'm going to answer Trudy's question, and then I'll get back to you, Miss Andrea, okay? So Trudy said her daughter took her mom to the hospital and says she has dementia. Is there any treatment to help for dementia? I don't know a lot about dementia. So Trudy, that is a very good question. So in my experience, let's start with is there, getting diagnosed with dementia. So dementia has such a stigma, right? A lot of people do not want to be diagnosed with dementia or even admit. I mean, I'm the same way. Nobody wants to be able to say, I'm having thinking problems, right? I'm having trouble with my memory. I'm having trouble with these kinds of things. So people are very private about it, and we are able, we are created in the image of God, and we are very complex beings. What we have, though, is the ability to hide. We have the ability to hide the fact that we are changing, and that our thinking processes are changing. So Trudy, because there's such a stigma with thinking processes changes, we hide it for a long time. So getting anybody who is listening out there, finding out early on, the earlier on you can find out somebody is having changes and actually get in there and start to do things, the more there is that you can do. More and more research, and this is not a popular subject out in our groups, in the large Facebook groups, more and more research is actually showing that dementia has a very strong lifestyle basis. And what I mean by that is, yes, some people have a genetic predisposition for dementia. But just because you have a genetic predisposition for something does not mean that you will develop it, right? So people can have a genetic predisposition for say breast cancer, but because they have changed their lifestyle, because they did things differently, they have decreased their risk for it. There is a study out in Finland, and I think it was in the 70s. I'll have to go look it up again. But there was a study done in Finland where they've actually proven, because they've been doing this study for almost 50 years now, that change in diet, they had an extremely high incidence of people with cardiovascular disease in Finland. And so they did they really did a cultural change where they started to work on diet and exercise and lifestyle changes. A lot of the people in Finland in the 70s were smoking, and they had cardiovascular disease. And they did a longitudinal study where they changed people's lifestyles. And guess what? The cardiovascular disease in Finland plummeted like a rock because it was the whole culture changed. So there's a lot of research out there. Back to Trudy's question, is there any treatment to help for dementia? There's a lot of lifestyle things, because There's research that shows blood sugar plays a significant role with dementia. Anybody who is diabetic and has significantly high A1Cs can develop dementia over time. Vascular dementia, right? What I was talking about earlier on in the program, my mom, cardiovascular disease, not having the right lifestyle, even though it was. So my mom's a really good example of this. She was a smoker. She was extremely stressed, and they use a lot of alcohol, and they did exercise, so they did do that, but they didn't have a great lifestyle regarding some of those kinds of things. And so, back to Trudy's question, are there treatments to help? Lifestyle changes can help. There's a lot of lifestyle changes that can help. Do not discount medication at the beginning. Medication is if you think about it, there are maybe they're starting to realize there are up to maybe 38 different factors that can contribute to dementia. So if you only plug one hole, which is what medication does, medication plugs one hole, you still have a lot of other holes that things can kind of go through. So medication plugs one hole. It's good to plug that hole. I'm not saying don't plug that hole, but it doesn't take dementia away. Dementia is not what we call a monotherapy thing. Like, for example, I have wrist pain today, right? A monotherapy for wrist pain would be for me to take Tylenol because my wrist is hurting. So take the medication, impact the pain loop, and then my pain is decreased. So we have monotherapies. Dementia is not something that is a monotherapy. You cannot just take one medication and cure dementia. That's not how dementia works. But the medications for dementia actually can decrease some of the rapidness of the changes. So don't not take the medication, but also don't necessarily think that that's a cure. So Trudy, I hope that kind of helps you. I would love for you to reach out to me privately and message me if you have more questions. I know there are not a lot of resources in South Africa, so I would love to dialogue with you again, Trudy. So Andrea has a question. Thank you so much, Andrea. Hi, Ralph. I'm glad you're here. It's apparently a very early Saturday morning because I'm not getting a lot of people hop on live, but that's okay. I can talk. So Andrea's question is, when you were diagnosed with early onset, you weren't given a lot of information. Fortunately, you know a lot about how it affects the mind and have done a lot of research. What I don't know a lot about is how it affects the body. I know now it affects sleep, vision, and balance. What other physical effects can it affect? And can it cause calf swelling? So I'll start with the calf swelling first, Miss Andrea. No, I don't think dementia per se can cause calf swelling. That to me would be, I don't know whether you have some other underlying medical conditions, things like, and yes, I will speak to the hereditary of that in a second, Ralph. Dementia per se doesn't cause calf swelling, but a lot of people with dementia have other comorbidities. Things like cardiovascular disease, things like congestive heart failure, things like diabetes, things like, some of those kinds of things. So I would say possibly the calf swelling might be related, Andrea, to another medical comorbidity. Back to your first question, about dementia and early onset dementia. I don't know how young you were when you were diagnosed, and I'm really sorry. I know that must be very, very scary. I would love to kind of know how young you were when you were diagnosed and how long you have had dementia now. That'll help tailor my answer to you a little bit better. But let's just talk about how dementia affects the body versus the mind. So I started developing this product recently, and I've really been giving it a lot of thought, how to explain to people how dementia works. So I've come up with an analogy, and I'd love feedback on this. I've come up with an analogy of using an airplane and a flight. So if you think about our life as an airplane journey, as a flight, when you're on the runway, right? That's pre-birth, that's preconception, that's we're still in mommy's tummy, right? So birth, the process of birth is like a takeoff. So birth and our developmental years are like a takeoff on a flight. We have all of this stuff developing. We have all of our physical development. We have all of our cognitive development. All of that during the takeoff. So the flight itself, if you want to think about a flight, a long flight, is like our adulthood, like our lifespan, right? So we develop cognitively. We actually keep developing until about 25. That's when we stop to develop cognitively. Then we have our flight. So as an adult, we have our flight where we've got some turbulence, we got some ups and downs, we've got some life, right? Life happens. Well, when we are diagnosed, Andrea, like you have with early onset Alzheimer's, we know that we're starting a slow decline, a descent, right? So in that process, there's a lot that we can do to delay it. And yes, there's a lot of cognitive stuff that happens. But what tends to happen is people stay physically pretty good at the beginning. But as the brain starts to be affected, because the brain takes care of everything, right? Our brain is our breathing, our balance, our vision. Okay, so Onia, our vision, all of these things are in our brain. So the first stuff that tends to be affected by early onset dementia is the higher level cognitive skills, what we call the executive functions, right? So like I said at the beginning, emotional regulation, time management, working memory, which is typically the first thing people notice is my memory is impaired. A reconstitution of information, things like anticipating consequences, planning, organization, those higher level skills tend to be the first things that are affected by dementia. And as we start to lose that and as the brain starts to shrink, wherever the damage in the brain is, that's where it starts to affect the physical stuff, right? So sleep and vision and balance. So really, Andrea, the answer to your question is ultimately over time, dementia can impact every one of our physical systems because, and that's why every person's dementia, even though dementia is, and so remember, dementia is the umbrella term, and underneath dementia, you have all these different silos, right? So as people start to, some people have Alzheimer's dementia, some people have vascular, some people have mixed, all of these different types of dementia, and they have certain characteristics that are more common to one versus another. Over time, all people with dementia pretty much start to have certain things that are common to them because as the brain is shrinking, that kind of is what comes about. So I hope that answered your question, Miss Andrea. I know it must be very hard, and if there's anything in particular I can help you with, please reach out. I know that you have some challenges being at your age, so definitely I would love for you to message me if you have questions, okay? And then Ralph, back to your question. Oh, excuse me. Can I speak to the hereditariness of dementia? So not all dementias are hereditary. So Alzheimer's dementia was named for a man by the name of, I cannot say his first name, Alzheimer. He was a German guy in, obviously, Germany, who who came up with the plaques, found the plaques and the tangles in people's brains, and had noticed all of these changes that people had, and therefore it was called Alzheimer's dementia. So Alzheimer's dementia is one type. So we back to the umbrella term. We have the term. So dementia per se is what we call an umbrella term. So there's an umbrella that says dementia, and dementia literally just means changes in thinking. And then under that, we have Alzheimer's disease, we have frontotemporal dementia, we have mixed dementia, we have vascular dementia, we have, I think there's several different, there are a couple more. Some of these are a little bit more rare than others, but Alzheimer's dementia is typically the one that is thought of to be hereditary. And so some people can some people can have a gene. So the gene's called apolipoprotein, and I always have to slow down and say this, apolipoprotein, because I can never come up with the word. Those are that is the gene that people carry when they have the hereditary type of dementia. However, just because you have that gene doesn't necessarily mean that you will get dementia. So it is hereditary to a degree. However, not everybody who has the gene develops dementia, and the converse is also true. Not everybody who doesn't have the gene develops dementia. There are a lot of people who do not have the gene, the Alzheimer's gene, develop dementia. And so Alzheimer's per se, and I could be wrong, research changes every day, so I could very well be wrong, but the last I was aware, Alzheimer's per se can only be diagnosed truly on autopsy. So when we and there's no like blood test for it. They do some they're starting to do some scans that can start to recognize the traits that people have when they have Alzheimer's. So there's more and more specific tests that are starting to come out, but there's no like blood test that says, oh, your A1C is 45, you've got diabetes, right? There's no blood test that you can take that says you have dementia. So it is kind of like Parkinson's disease and some of these other things. A lot of diseases and a lot of things that happen in the medical world, right, are by process of elimination. So we do a CAT scan to see, was it a stroke? Okay, you're having changes in your thinking. Let's do a CAT scan to see if it was a stroke. All right, it wasn't a stroke. Okay, let's do an MRI to see if it was a stroke, because they always start with a CAT scan, and the CAT scan is done mostly when something happens to see if there's a bleed in the brain. But then, they'll do an MRI, and then the MRI starts to show these changes in people's brains, but it's not, that's dementia. They're starting to recognize patterns and things like that to make it easier, but being diagnosed with it is really more a process of elimination. It's not this, it's not a brain tumor, it's not that. This is maybe why we're having these thinking changes. So Ralph, that was a great statement. So I'm going to stick with this because you were the one who asked the last question, and then I'll get back to Andrea. So your mom and 2 of your aunts and your sister have or had dementia, and so you're concerned about your chances of getting it. So to be perfectly honest, frontotemporal dementia, I don't know enough about the hereditariness of frontotemporal dementia. Now, the fact that your mom and 2 of your aunts and your sister, so your sister has frontotemporal dementia. Did your mom and aunts also have frontotemporal dementia, or did they have a different type of dementia? So if you can throw that out there for me, that would be a blessing to me. And so back to Andrea, and then I'll get back to Ralph again. You thought Alzheimer's just attacked one part of the brain. Can it attack different parts? So what'll happen is these plaques, Andrea, what'll happen is these plaques and tangles continue to develop in the brain. They develop in different parts of the brain. So if you, let's think of a way of explaining this. Oh, we'll use this as an example. So think about a really buff guy, right, that goes to the gym, and he's really worked really hard. So think Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was, the really strong guy, huge big muscles, right? You can see all of those muscles. That's hypertrophy, or that's over development of the muscles. So fast forward, now he's 70, his muscles don't look like that anymore, right? So that's called atrophy. So what happens in the brain too is we have our brain, and our thinking processes develop up until 25. And I hate to break it to anybody who is over 25. Everything after 25 onwards is a downward trajectory for us all, even though, we are functioning pretty normally. So atrophy will start to happen in a person's brain as they are progressing through their dementia. So the plaques and tangles will be in various different parts, and that'll cause atrophy. So when you actually take a look at a person with dementia's brain, you'd have the skull on the outside, and then the brain itself, which is supposed to fill up the whole brain cavity, starts to atrophy. And so because of that atrophying, that's what you start to see for the different parts of the brain being affected. So I hope that helps you, Miss Andrea. So Ralph, back to your question. I would guess, just off of what I have seen here, is that you might possibly have two things. You might have two things going on. Your mom and your two aunts might have had Alzheimer's and more of a hereditary type of dementia, and your sister might have have frontotemporal dementia, and then often overlaying that might also be Alzheimer's. So people, and that's called mixed dementia. So labels saying one thing is one thing is another, is very is helpful to a degree, from a giving a label perspective, but functionally it doesn't always necessarily make a significant difference from a functional perspective. So my guess would be your late mom and your two aunts might have had Alzheimer's, and your sister has frontotemporal, but also might have Alzheimer's. So a few questions, and back to the research that is coming out. The fact that your mom and your two aunts, so here's something that's not necessarily always thought of. What I think about when you have three people that all grew up in the same place, in the same time, geographically, they probably grew up at the same place. And there's a lot of research that's also starting to show that there can be environmental toxins, environmental aspects to dementia. So say your mom and your aunts all grew up in the same place, and they were living in, I don't know how old you are, Ralph, but my guess would be, so say your mom is 80, I'm just going to use 80 or 90. So 80 years ago, where did she grow up? Was she rural? Did she live in a city? Were there environmental toxins? Was there mold? What kind of water did they drink? Did they have other environmental factors that related to the dementia? And so, people, an infection, was there, like, seriously, mold toxicity is really being shown to impact people's brains. So I would strongly, don't worry too. First of all, there's nothing you can do to worry. Worrying about it is not going to make it um, a reality. What you can do is that so I'm going back to your comment. Um, as far as you know, unfortunately, you never know which type of dementia she had. She lost her ability to walk and was wheelchair bound for some years. Um, so that's a great question. Is there any particular or specific dementia associated with losing one's ability to walk? So, Ralph, that kind of goes back to the same thing that I was telling Andrea earlier on, right, about the flight, the takeoff, the adulthood, and then the progressive decline that people will have. So, as people develop, they have their physical and their cognitive development kind of walks hand in hand together. And then we have our adulthood, and then we have our decline and our descent after a diagnosis of dementia. The first stuff that happens is the cognitive, and that's the stuff that nobody ever really wants to talk about, right? And then we have, after that, we have the physical stuff start to happen. So if you there's a model out there, it's called, or there are a lot of different staging tools for dementia. One is called the functional assessment staging tool, and that is called a retrogenesis model. It's called retrogenesis, back to the beginning, right? So as we decline through dementia, just as we have developed, you're a baby, the first thing you do is suck and swallow. Then you can, you make eye contact. You can see what's right here in front of you. You start to become aware of what's around you. Somebody will give you something. The first thing is a reflex. Later on, it's I can pick it up myself, right? When a little kiddo sits there and picks up each little Cheerio by themselves. So they're using their hand. They can recognize something that's outside of themselves. They now become aware of something outside. I am me, and the world is out there, and that's scary. And as they continue to develop, right, they'll start to get bowel and bladder control. They'll walk. They'll crawl, sit, crawl, roll, sit, crawl, walk, run. As we are going through all of these developmental changes, well, the model of retrogenesis literally is where we ended at the end of our developmental years and became an adult, and we stayed here. The model of retrogenesis for dementia really impacts us, and we kind of go backwards, back through that process. So if one of the other things that people often ask is, how does dementia kill, right? Well, a lot of people die with dementia. So ultimately, most people actually die with dementia. They don't die from dementia. Like, you die from a heart attack, or you die from a stroke, right? Those are the sudden crashes. If you think about a flight, you're 50 years old, you're on your flight, boom, you have a massive heart attack and die. So dementia, because it's taking the brain away, what it does over time is it takes those functions away. So if you live long enough with dementia, ultimately the last stages of dementia, almost everybody is bedridden, unable to walk, unable to make eye contact, unable to feed themselves, unable to suck and swallow, and then ultimately their body stops to breathe, and then they pass away. So yes, everybody who has dementia and lives long enough will lose typically the ability to walk. Some people that process, like I just recently had a patient who had, when I started seeing her, I could walk with her to the bathroom. I could help her. She could still recognize a toothbrush. We brushed our teeth. I had to sequence her through her self-care, but she could still, step by step, if I told her what to do, we could do it. And she, from the time I saw her, when I first started seeing her to now, was less than 3 months, and in that process she went from that to within 3-4 weeks to, guys, I really think we need to do hospice, to within 3-4 weeks after that passing away. So Karen says the neurologist said her husband has mixed dementia and his whole brain is shrinking. He said he's never seen anything like that before. So sometimes people just have parts of their brain start to atrophy, and I don't know, enough about, how rapid. Maybe it has to do more with how rapidly his brain is atrophying. So I'm so sorry for that, Miss Karen. That must be very scary. And mixed dementia is one of the hardest ones to have to deal with. So if you have any particular questions, let's see here. You said his first diagnosis was frontotemporal, but after the lumbar puncture, it shows Alzheimer's. Yes, so that's more of a mixed dementia picture. And says, thank you. Educative, asked the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. Do they have the same symptoms? So I don't know how long you were on, and but dementia is a what we call an umbrella term, right? So dementia is an umbrella term that just literally means changes in people's thinking. Alzheimer's, if you think about it, so for everybody else listening out there, Anne and I've also kind of messaged back and forth. Anne actually lives. She's a wonderful one. I'm so excited to have met Anne because Anne actually lives in Kenya, in a very rural part of Kenya. And so one of my passions, one of the things that I truly want to try to do, is reach people who are underserved in all of the world. Because I was born and raised in South Africa, right? And so we've been living in the United States for 27 years. And as I've been doing this, I've been coming into contact with people all over the world who live in very rural parts of the world, but they have access to a cell phone. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is reach out to people in rural parts of the world and be able to educate them about dementia. And so, Anne, I know a little bit about Kenya. Like I said, I'm from South Africa. So if you think about dementia as a umbrella term, we have silos, right? You have silos, grain silos. So you have all these different silos underneath this umbrella, and each one of them is a different type of a dementia. For example, Alzheimer's is the one that's probably the most commonly found. Then you have things like frontotemporal dementia. Then you have vascular dementia. Vascular dementia is probably the second highest incidence of dementia is vascular dementia. You have your frontotemporal dementia, you have your vascular dementia, you have Parkinson's dementia, you have alcohol-induced dementia, which can be permanent or reversible, and then you have mixed dementia. So each one of these silos is like a different silo. But humans are the same, right? We go through the same developmental process, and this is why I like the functional assessment staging tool, because really doesn't matter from a practical perspective. My background is an occupational therapist. This is what I do for a living. From a practical perspective, even though each different silo of dementia is different, the brain is the same, and the decline over time is very similar. Yes, frontotemporal dementia has certain characteristics that are common. Vascular dementia has certain characteristics that are common to it. So that's why, a lot of people will have similar symptoms, but each person's presentation of their symptoms will be different because we are all different. And our, our strengths and our qualities are the things that we do. We're all inherently different. We all have different cognitive capacity or cognitive reserve. We're not all physically as strong as one another. So that's why dementia looks so different in each person, because each person's different. Each person's brain is different. Each person's natural resources are different. Each person's abilities were different. So all of this makes every person look a little differently. And that's one of the reasons I like the retrogenesis model, because if you understand how people develop, you can kind of quickly start to see where they are in the process, and it makes it very easy to be able to help people right there in the moment where they're at. So Jennifer said once her mom became bedbound, she developed venous insufficiency and has gangrene in her right foot. Do you think the venous insufficiency is connected to vascular dementia or her immobility? That is a really good question, Miss Jennifer. So your mom became bedbound. I know she has fairly end-stage dementia based off of what you and I have also messaged. Yes, I think probably her venous insufficiency is connected to the vascular dementia. I don't think that the immobility is probably helping the matter, but most people who have that level of venous insufficiency and so on probably, and this is just a guess, and you can let me know if I'm right or wrong in the comments, I would guess your mom was probably diabetic too. So venous insufficiency is probably more related to her cardiovascular system that then caused the gangrene in her leg. And if there was a diabetic component to it as well, that can all make things worse. So I would love for you guys who are on here to give me feedback about what I could do better. I am thinking about maybe changing the format of this and maybe seeing if I need to make them shorter segments as opposed to an hour long. So if you have feedback for me, please put it in the comments. What do you guys want? I am doing this to serve you guys. I want to make this really truly something for you. So if you have suggestions, I would love to hear them. I would, one of the thoughts that I had was maybe doing this in like maybe every day or every other day, and just 15-minute segments and pulling up a question. Or do you guys like the hour-long session where you can hop on and kind of see and then ask me specific questions? So I'm just trying to brainstorm here, and so that would be appreciative. If you're watching this on replay, please put in the comments replay. If you're watching this live, go ahead and throw me a comment live. Also, if you want to get a hold of me, I do answer Messenger. My messenger is Lizette Cloete, so please, message me privately, Facebook friend request me. I will take, I do that. If you want to watch more videos and know when I go live, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can watch it there. It'll let you know that I did one. So that's called Think Different Dementia. So you have 3 things that you can do today. Join Think Different Dementia's Facebook group, join or subscribe to Think Different Dementia's YouTube channel. If you're in Africa, I have an invitation to you. There's a second one that I started with Anne. It's called Think Different Dementia Africa. So if you're from Africa, if you're anywhere in the continental Africa, please join both. But we really do want to try to grow a group in Africa. And I actually have a very, very large dream and vision, guys. I want to actually serve each different continent. So we'll see where it goes. The Lord is good and kind. So anybody have any other particular questions right now? Okay, Jennifer, great. Thank you so much. So you like the hour-long format. So it seems like I should keep that and maybe add, What do you guys think? Maybe adding like one question a week, a few questions a week. Like I said, I love to serve. This is for you guys. And what I try to do afterwards is I actually do try to tag the people whose questions I answered in the post so that they can come back and watch it later on. Does anybody on live? I see there are a few people on live. We have about 10 more minutes. Does anybody on live have any particular questions that I can answer this morning regarding anything related to dementia, or even if you just have a question for me personally? I am an open book. I love to share. Like I said, I share a lot about my own family, my own journey with dementia. Oh my word, Andrea. Wow. That's dedication, girl. It starts at 5 a.m. for you. I'm so sorry. Email reminders the day before so you won't forget to get on. I only know you're on Facebook when scrolling. You don't like the 15-minute format. You like the hour. Good. Thank you for that feedback. So, Miss Andrea, I started when I started the show. I did it at noon because it was a little easier for me. But what you could do is if you have 5 o'clock in the morning, that's dedication, my friend. That is dedication. If you, yes, I will talk about that. If you emailing reminders the day before is actually really difficult for me, because there are too many people that I need to email, so that's likely not an option. But what you can do is you can let's see, how can we do this? Can you put a reminder on your phone, like once a week, that it'll tell you that it's time? Can you email me a question every week? If you email me a question every week and I answer your question, I will tag you, and then you can watch it later on. And so those are a couple of suggestions. I think there's a way to there should be a setting that you can click on Facebook that says notify me when person goes live again. That's something that you can try. So let's give those as a try, and then I'm going to answer Jennifer's question real quick. Can I talk about agnosia, which literally means not being able to recognize people? I think it's people. Or you know what, Miss Jennifer, can I answer that one next week so I can research it a little bit, because that is one that's not all that frequent. It's 5 p.m. in Kenya. That's great. Yes, that's wonderful. So Lisa said, was it normal for Dad to be completely confused coming home after a short outing and didn't know whose house he was in? So sudden changes, typically, Lisa, sudden changes are not as common. I guess the question I would have for you is, was this the first time in a long time that you took your dad out of the house for a short outing? Or do you go out of the house every day and this was like a sudden change? Because if it was a sudden change like that, I would be wondering, is there something acute going on? Things like a urinary tract infection, did he have a stroke? Other things like that, because it shouldn't be, I shouldn't say it shouldn't be normal, but I really haven't heard that many people just leaving the house for a short outing and then coming home being that confused with where they are. However, having said that, people who are going through dementia, even just the slightest change can really make a big change. So he might have just really been more tired when he came in. Did this clear up? Did it clear up afterwards, or does he still not know whose house he's in? And as people, with the retrogenesis model, as people are going through dementia, they may actually get to the point where when they're saying, I want to go home, we're thinking, I want to go home to where they're living right now, like my home where I'm at right now. But where they may be is they may be 7 years old. They're recognizing this is not where they grew up. I want to go home to the home I lived in when I was 7 years old. So I hope, Lisa, that you're still on there. Um, and I hope that's helpful. I think that when you have I think what I want you to take from this today, Miss Lisa, is that um, sudden changes, like really sudden changes, are not. It can happen, but usually there's a precipitating event to it, something like a urinary tract infection or things like that. And Jennifer also said her mom never knew she had dementia and acknowledges this made things very hard in the early stages. Yes, that is very common, Jennifer, very, very common. So I'm going to write your questions down after this live, and I'm going to put them on next week's so I can actually research it a little bit more, because sometimes I'm just flying by the seat of my pants, and I wasn't doing a good fly there. And so Andrea says there's a private Facebook group for people with dementia called Memory Warriors. It's only for people with dementia and memory loss. I think that's wonderful, Andrea. Thank you for sharing that. So if you're out there and watching and you have dementia yourself, please join that Facebook group and make friends with Andrea, because this is a community to try to help everybody. So it is about 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I know it's hard for some people to get on. Andrea, you are my hero for getting on at 5 o'clock in the morning. And Anne, every Saturday it's going to be at whatever 5 o'clock in Kenya. I start at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. If you put it in your phone, you could try to remember that way. I'm going to say to everybody, thank you for coming to the Baffled Brain, Demystifying Dementia. This is the weekly hour-long Facebook Live that will teach you everything you want to know about dementia and how to manage it. Today was March the 6th, 2021, and this is or was episode 15, and my name is Lizette Cloete. I'm an occupational therapist from my company's called Think Different Dementia, where we believe caregivers deserve reliable and accessible answers to questions, because providing caregivers reliable and actionable strategies give them and the people with dementia their best quality of life, improving relationships and delaying decline. So the three things, yet again, that you can do is join Think Different Dementia. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel called Think Different Dementia. Oh, thank you. That is so sweet. Where do you live again, Jennifer? I would love to talk to them. I really would. This is my passion. It truly is my passion. So the three things: join Think Different Dementia's private Facebook group. You can message me privately on Facebook using just my name, and then you can subscribe to my YouTube channel that'll show you all of the videos as they come up. And then if you're in Africa, please join Think Different Dementia Africa. And our homework is to grow that group, girls. So yeah, I'm not too far from you, actually. I live in Greenwood, South Carolina. That is about maybe 4 hours from Greensboro, and I would love to network with them. Just because somebody is on hospice doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can do to help them. So please, please, guys, ask me questions. Thank you for coming on live. I appreciate it. I really do enjoy serving you. So the last thing I want to say is the Lord bless you and keep you, and thank you for joining me today. Bye.